Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. The USC commitment sweatshirt comes back on early Saturday morning. Former Georgia defensive lineman Jamaal Jarrett committing to USC. Where you have to start this conversation, in my opinion, is the same spot we started with Keyshawn Silver, and that is just looking at the body type first. We're going to get into Jamaal Jarrett, what he brings as a football player. Let's start with 6'5", 350. When you go back to Georgia, the inside of that defensive line in 2024, Gavin Mayer, less than 300 pounds. Nate Clifton, 295. Devin Compton's at 290 pounds. I think the only interior defensive lineman that played consistent snaps for USC in 2024 that was over 300 pounds was Kobe Pepe. And now you're bringing Jamaal Jarrett, Keyshawn Silver. Jamaal Jarrett going 6'5", 350 with an 81-inch wingspan. Keyshawn Silver, 6'4", 345. You are bringing in some massive bodies on the inside of the defensive line. And I think, secondly, you're bringing in a ton of depth. I look at this USC defensive line. 12 months ago, we were massively concerned about the depth that USC had on the inside of the defensive line. They probably had to play guys like Nate Clifton and Gavin Mayer probably more than they wanted to in terms of snap count. One of the most important things we talk about in terms of roster building and elite defensive lines, yes, it's one thing to have star talent. You have to be able to keep those big bodies fresh and have a deep defensive line where you can rotate in and out guys for 4 quarters of a football game. USC didn't have the size and they didn't have the depth in 2024. You fast forward to 2025, Jamaal Jarrett, Keyshawn Silver, you're not only adding size, but you're adding a lot of depth. And the crazy part about this conversation to me is I'm starting to look and kind of, conceptualize or visualize, if you will, what this USC defensive line is going to look like in the 2025 year. And you just look at the inside first, Keyshawn Silver, Jamaal Jarrett, and 2 guys that are going 340 plus, 2 guys that have played significant football in the SEC. Then you start looking at some of those depth pieces, Carlton Jones, Jida Abasiri, going into year 2. You're bringing a guy like Jakeem Stewart, who it's hard to see him not contributing in some way as a true freshman. And then you have a guy in Devin Tompkins who is clearly just getting better as a football player and probably will get even better in 2025 as he puts a little bit more weight on. That's 6 guys. We're talking about 6 deep, including some other true freshmen and guys like Floyd Boucard who could get into the rotation as well. I look at the USC defensive line this year. Go back to last year, we had maybe 3 to 4 tops defensive linemen that we were, confident in heading into 2024. That number's up to 6 or 7 for USC on the inside, and it doesn't even sound like USC's done. So not only are you addressing the size of this defensive line, you're also addressing the depth. This might be one of the stronger units on this football team heading into 2025. Want to get into a little bit of Jamaal Jarrett, talk a little bit about what else this defensive line is going to look like heading into 2025. Now, before we get into it, as always, to the USC fans, it's been a blast talking this pro. And more specifically, it's been really fun, but there's been a lot of ups and downs. And there's been a lot of different talking points we've touched on over the last couple of weeks. Whether it's the highs, whether it's the lows, y'all are always checking the boys out. You're always giving your feedback in the comment section. That stuff means the absolute world. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into this one. And you look at Jamaal Jarrett, and I think where you want to start is 6'5", 350, 81-inch wingspan. A lot of traits that Coach Henny and Sean New are looking like and saying, we like that a lot. Now, if there's one thing I'd like to see Jamaal Jarrett probably clean up, he hasn't played a ton of football for Georgia the first 2 years, 126 total snaps. I think he could lose a little, and it's kind of funny because we've had the conversation about guys like Devin Tompkins and Jida Abasiri, putting on weight. Jamaal Jarrett's probably a guy that you want to shed a little bit. He is an extremely powerful defensive lineman on the inside. Going back to his high school film is just grown men stuff. You probably want to get out of your stance a little bit quicker, and you probably want to be a little bit more agile in terms of getting off blocks and running the line of scrimmage. Jamaal Jarrett can do the dirty work. 6'5", 350. He's a very hard person to move in that. I do think that's the primary function that he's going to serve for USC. That stuff matters. Jamaal Jarrett, his value to this USC defense is not going to be measured by tackles for loss and sacks. It's probably going to be better reflected in terms of how these linebackers are playing behind him. When teams are trying to run the football and they're trying to double team Jamaal Jarrett and then work a guard or center up to a linebacker. Jamaal Jarrett being this physical presence on the inside, kind of eating up that double team, allowing your linebackers to funnel downhill. That, to me, is the purpose Jamaal Jarrett is going to bring. Can he, I guess where you want to see him grow, and I think a conversation that USC is going to have with him is, hey, you can play at 340, 335 and still be this really powerful human being on the inside, but maybe give a little bit more juice to your pass rush, maybe get out of your stance a little bit quicker and allow you to be a little bit more disruptive than just eating up double teams. That's probably the story for Jamaal Jarrett, but at the end of the day, this is another traitsy defensive lineman, just like Keyshawn Silver, where both Jamaal Jarrett and Keyshawn Silver, really, really intriguing traits on the defensive line, especially the size. You're looking at them both and saying, I think there's another level for both of these guys to play at. Can Sean New, Coach Henney, get that level out of these cats? And if you do, I think you're looking at a defensive line that is going to be damn impressive in 2025. Look, Lincoln Riley, I've been critical at times of Lincoln Riley. You guys know that. What Danton Lynn, Lincoln Riley, Coach Henney, Sean Nua have done in terms of fundamentally changing the personnel on the defensive line from 2024 going into 2025, it's impressive. You land a 5-star defensive lineman, Jakeem Stewart. You land other couple pieces, Cash Jacobson, Floyd Boucard, who I like a lot. Then you go to the transfer portal and add the kind of bodies you were looking for. To me, on the inside of this defensive line, it's deeper and it's better than it was in the 2024 year. And then you start looking at the edge position. Anthony Lucas, Shelby, Cam Fowle, and a couple of young cats that you kind of feel are going to take that step. I'm starting to look at this defensive line and say it's hard not to see it being significantly better than what it was in 2024. And if that's the case, that's huge for this USC team, because you look at what I thought was USC's biggest problem is they just did not win enough on the defensive line, whether that's stopping the run and creating negative plays, whether that's getting after the passer in the pass rush. It felt like if Danton Lynn and this USC defense wanted to create negative plays, they had to bring safeties into the box. They had to blitz linebackers. Kind of looking at 2025, you say, I don't think USC is going to have to rely on the blitz packages as much, because I think you got a front four that has the chance to be really stinking good in 2025. Really, really impressed with what USC has done. And it kind of goes to that conversation that we had when we broke down Keyshawn Silver, and that is Lincoln Riley talked about it after practice. Hey, we got a pool of resources. It's limited. It's not infinite, unfortunately. And we got to figure out where to best use those resources to build the best roster. Does it sting to see a guy like Zachariah Branch walk away from the program? Yeah, 100%. But you look at it and say, Zachariah Branch getting a lot of resources his way to play for USC. Are those resources better served getting a guy like Keyshawn Silver and getting a guy like Jamaal Jarrett? I would argue yes. And it's not a shot on Zachariah Branch. It's just how you want to construct this team and where do we need to get better as a program. You're starting to see the resources get allocated where they need to get allocated. We'll see how it works out. It doesn't sound like USC is done getting this defensive line right. So we'll continue to break down the commitments as they come in. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later.